What if everything you were ever taught about happiness was wrong? What if the car, the promotion, the perfect relationship, what if none of that was ever supposed to make you happy in the first place? Think about this for a second. A man spends 30 years of his life chasing one dream. He wakes up early, he sacrifices weekends, he skips dinners with his family, and then one day he gets it. The corner office, the salary, the title on the door, and he stands there in that office on a Tuesday afternoon looking out the window, and the only thing he feels is empty. Just empty. Like something is missing, but he cannot name it. That man is not alone. That man is most of us. We chase the thing, we get the thing, and then we immediately start chasing the next thing. And nobody ever stops to ask the real question: why? Why does happiness always feel like it is one step ahead of us? Why does it always feel just out of reach? Welcome to Wisdom Woven, the place where ancient wisdom meets the questions modern life forgot to answer. If this is your first time here, take a moment right now and hit that subscribe button. And if this video makes you think, makes you feel something real, drop a comment below. Tell the world what happiness means to you, because when you do that, this video reaches more people who need it, and that matters. Like this video, share it with someone who is searching, and let us begin something that might just change the way you see everything. Now, about 2,500 years ago, a man sat under a tree. He was not a god, he was not a mythological figure, he was a human being. A prince, actually. Someone who had been given everything the world considers happiness. A palace, wealth, a beautiful family, servants, comfort, every desire fulfilled before it could even fully form. And yet, one night, he walked away from all of it. His name was Siddhartha Gautama, and the question that drove him out of that palace was the same question that keeps modern people awake at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling. What is the actual cause of human suffering? Not the surface cause, not the obvious one, the real one. Most people assume Buddhism is a religion about letting go of desire. They imagine monks in orange robes sitting in silence, detached from the world, feeling nothing. That is not what this is. That picture is incomplete, and it misses the most important thing Siddhartha ever discovered, which is not about feeling less, it is about understanding more. Here is what the world sold you. Happiness is something you earn. You work hard, you build something, you acquire things, you reach milestones, and at the end of all that effort, happiness is waiting for you like a reward. That is the agreement. That is the deal modern life offers every single person on the planet. Work now, be happy later. But Buddhism starts with a completely different observation, one that is uncomfortable, one that nobody really wants to hear at first. It says, suffering is not a mistake. It is not a glitch in your life. It is not happening to you because you made the wrong choices or because you're not trying hard enough. Suffering is built into the way most humans experience life. It is the default setting. And that sounds depressing. It sounds like someone just pulled the rug out from under you. But stay with this, because what comes next is where everything shifts. Siddhartha did not walk out of that palace in despair. He walked out in curiosity. He wanted to understand the mechanics of human misery, not to complain about it, not to escape it, to understand it so completely that it could no longer control him. And that is a very different kind of mission than what most people pursue. He spent years searching. He tried extreme fasting. He studied under great teachers. He practiced discipline so harsh that his body nearly gave out. And after all of that, sitting under that Bodhi tree in a place called Bodh Gaya, something cracked open inside him. Not dramatically, not with thunder and lightning, quietly. The way dawn comes, not all at once, but gradually, until suddenly everything is lit. What he found was not a philosophy, it was not a set of rules, it was a diagnosis, a clear, honest, almost scientific diagnosis of why human beings suffer, and more importantly, what actually lies on the other side of that suffering. What he called it was simple. He called it awakening. Not heaven, not paradise, awakening. Right here, in this life, in this body, while still breathing. Now, here's the part that most people miss. The happiness that Buddhism points toward is not the happiness of getting what you want. It is not the happiness of success or pleasure or praise. Those things feel good, no one is denying that, but they all have one thing in common. They end. They always end. And when they end, the hunger comes back, sometimes bigger than before. The happiness Buddhism talks about is something underneath all of that. It is a kind of stillness that does not depend on circumstances, a kind of okayness that does not require life to behave itself. That does not mean sitting still while the world falls apart. It means carrying something steady inside you even when the world does fall apart. And this is what makes it radical, because everything else, every self-help book, every motivational speech, every productivity system, they are all trying to help you control your external world better. Buddhism goes inward. It says the external world will never fully cooperate, but the internal world, that you can actually work with. Think of it this way. Most people spend their entire lives rearranging the furniture in a house that is on fire. They are trying to make the uncomfortable comfortable, trying to make the temporary permanent, trying to hold tightly to things that are, by their very nature, slipping away. And they wonder why they are exhausted. They wonder why peace feels so far away. Buddhism does not ask you to stop caring. It does not ask you to become cold or indifferent. It asks you to look, really look, at what you are actually holding on to and why. It asks you to question the assumptions you have been living by since you were old enough to want something. And that question, that honest, uncomfortable, necessary question, is where happiness actually begins. Not at the destination, not when you finally get the thing, right here, in the asking, in the willingness to sit with the question without flinching. Over the course of this video, we are going to walk through what Buddhism actually teaches about the human mind, about desire, about meaning, about loss, and about what it actually means to live well, not as theory, not as ancient text, but as something real, something you can carry with you when you walk out into your ordinary Tuesday and suddenly see it differently. And the only question left worth asking right now is this: are you ready to look at happiness from a direction you have never tried before? Part 2. The root of all suffering and how to pull it out. There's a story from ancient India about a man who gets shot by a poisoned arrow. He falls to the ground. His friends rush to help him, and instead of letting them pull the arrow out, he stops them. He says, "Wait, first tell me, who shot this arrow? What was his name? What village did he come from? What kind of bow did he use? Was the string made of animal gut or plant fiber?" His friends stare at him, and while he's asking all these questions, the poison is spreading. Buddha told that story himself, and he told it for a reason. Because that man, the one bleeding on the ground, demanding answers to the wrong questions, that man is every single one of us. We are so busy trying to understand why life hurts that we forget to do the one thing that would actually help: pull the arrow out. Most people approach suffering like a mystery to be solved. They replay old conversations in their heads. They analyze why someone left, why they did not get chosen, why life took a particular turn. They build entire mental courtrooms inside their minds, presenting evidence, assigning blame, delivering verdicts, and all of that thinking, all of that circling, the arrow stays in, the poison keeps moving. Buddhism does not ask why life is painful. It accepts that pain is part of living. What it asks instead is something far more useful. What is the mechanism? What is actually driving human suffering at its core? Not the surface reasons, not the bad day or the difficult person or the failed plan. What is underneath all of that? And the answer Buddha arrived at, the answer that came to him under that Bodhi tree, was one word. One concept that, when you truly understand it, changes the way you see almost everything. That word is tanha. In the Pali language, it means craving, sometimes translated as thirst, a deep, restless, never-satisfied thirst that lives at the center of the untrained human mind. Now, when people hear the word craving, they think of obvious things: craving food, craving money, craving attention. But Buddha was pointing at something much deeper than that. He was talking about a fundamental orientation of the mind, a constant low-level dissatisfaction with the present moment, a feeling that things should be different from how they are, that you should have more, feel better, be further along, or be somewhere else than where you currently are. That feeling, that restless, reaching, grasping feeling, is tanha. And here's the uncomfortable part. It's so deeply wired into the human experience that most people don't even recognize it as a problem. They just call it ambition. They call it drive. They call it wanting better for yourself. And sometimes it is those things, but underneath all of it, if you go deep enough, there's this quiet ache, this sense that right now is not quite enough. Think about the last time you were completely at peace. Not excited, not stimulated, not distracted, actually at peace. For most people, that moment is surprisingly difficult to locate because the mind is almost always leaning forward, always reaching for the next thing, the next meal, the next message, the next version of life that will finally feel like enough. And the tragedy is that next version never quite arrives. Or it arrives, and within weeks the mind has already moved on to the one after that. This is what Buddhism calls the wheel of samsara, not as a mystical concept, but as a description of something you can observe happening in your own life right now. The cycle of wanting, getting, feeling satisfied briefly, and then wanting again, round and round. And the speed of modern life has made this wheel spin faster than it ever has before. More options, more stimulation, more comparison, more ways to feel like everyone else is living a version of life that is slightly better than yours. Here's where it gets interesting though. Buddhism does not say that desire itself is the enemy. That is a misunderstanding that has followed Buddhism around for centuries. Wanting food when you are hungry is not the problem. Wanting to grow, to create, to connect, none of that is the problem. The problem is attachment. The difference between desire and attachment is subtle, but it changes everything. Desire says, I would like this. Attachment says, I need this. I cannot be okay without this. I will not be at peace until I have this. Do you feel the difference? One is a preference, the other is a chain. And Buddha noticed that human beings spend almost all of their emotional energy not in simple desire, but in deep, panicked attachment. Attached to outcomes, attached to people staying the same, attached to circumstances cooperating, attached to a version of life that reality refuses to guarantee. And because reality refuses to guarantee any of that, suffering becomes almost inevitable. Not because life is cruel, but because the mind is fighting a battle it was never going to win. You cannot hold on to what is moving. You cannot freeze what is living. You cannot make permanent what is by nature temporary. And yet, the untrained mind tries to do exactly that, every single day. There's a beautiful and slightly humorous image in Buddhist teaching. It compares the untrained mind to a monkey in the jungle. The monkey grabs a branch, then spots another branch and grabs that one, then another, always moving, always reaching, never still, never satisfied with the branch it is holding. The mind, left to itself, operates exactly like that monkey. Restless, reactive, always chasing the next thing, never fully arriving anywhere. Now here is the shift. Here is where Buddhism moves from diagnosis to direction. If tanha, this craving, this grasping, is the root of suffering, then the path toward genuine happiness has to begin with something that feels almost counterintuitive to the modern mind. It has to begin with stopping. Not giving up, not quitting, stopping. Becoming still enough to actually see what is happening inside you. Most people are afraid of stillness, and that fear is not accidental. When you get quiet, when you stop running from one thing to the next, something rises to the surface. All the things you have been avoiding, all the feelings you have been drowning out with busyness and noise and consumption, they're still there. They have always been there, and the mind has been running from them at full speed. But Buddhism says those feelings you are running from are not your enemies, they're messengers. And the only way to understand the message is to stop running long enough to hear it. This is one of the central reasons why meditation is not just a wellness trend in Buddhist teaching, it is a diagnostic tool, a way of sitting with the actual contents of your mind without immediately reacting to them. When you sit in stillness long enough, really sit, not just close your eyes and wait for relaxation, you begin to see the patterns. You see the mind reaching, you see it grasping, you see it spinning the same stories about the same people and the same regrets and the same anxieties. And in seeing that, just in clearly, calmly seeing it, something begins to loosen. Not because you forced it, but because awareness itself has a kind of dissolving effect on unconscious patterns. This is what pulling out the arrow looks like in practice. It is not dramatic. It is not a single moment of enlightenment that permanently fixes everything. It is a gradual process of seeing clearly, of catching the mind mid-grasp and simply noticing, there it is again, that reaching, that restlessness, that quiet insistence that things should be other than they are. And in that noticing, just that simple, honest noticing, the grip loosens a little. The root of suffering is not the world outside you. The world outside is just the world, indifferent, unpredictable, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. The root is inside. It is in the relationship the mind has with experience. And because it is inside, that is actually good news, because the outside world cannot always be changed, but the inside, that is territory you can actually work with. So the question Buddhism leaves you with at this point is not philosophical, it is practical. Right now, today, in your actual life, what is it that you are gripping so tightly that it is cutting off circulation? What is the thing you have told yourself you cannot be okay without? Because that thing, that specific thing, is exactly where the real work begins. And what that work looks like, that is where this story goes next. The Buddhist art of living in this moment. There is a monk in Japan who has been making tea for 40 years. Every single morning, same ritual, same movements, same quiet attention. And when someone once asked him, "Do you not get bored doing the same thing every day for 4 decades?" he looked up slowly and said something that stopped the questioner completely. He said, "I have never made this cup of tea before. This one, right now, has never existed until this moment, and it will never exist again." That answer sounds poetic. It sounds like something you put on a wall print and forget about by Tuesday. But sit with it for a moment longer, because that monk was not being philosophical for the sake of sounding wise. He was describing something he had actually trained himself to experience, something most people spend their entire lives completely missing: the present moment. Not as a concept, as a living, breathing, unrepeatable reality happening right now. Here is the strange truth about human beings. We are the only creatures on Earth with the ability to be somewhere else than where we are. A dog lying in the sun is lying in the sun. It is not worrying about yesterday's walk or planning tomorrow's meal. It is simply there, warm, present, existing completely in that one moment. Humans, on the other hand, can be sitting at a dinner table while mentally rehearsing an argument that has not happened yet, can be on vacation while emotionally still stuck in last Thursday's meeting. The body is here, the mind is almost never here. Buddhism has a specific name for this. It is called mindfulness, or in Pali, sati. And before that word gets buried under years of wellness culture and app notifications reminding you to breathe, understand what it actually means in its original context. Sati does not mean relaxation. It does not mean thinking positive thoughts. It means clear, undistracted awareness of what is actually happening in your body, in your mind, in this moment, without layering a story on top of it. That distinction matters enormously, because most people do not experience life directly. They experience their thoughts about life. Something happens, and within milliseconds, the mind has already labeled it, judged it, compared it to something from the past, projected it into the future, and decided how it should make you feel. By the time you are actually responding to what happened, you are not responding to what happened. You are responding to a story the mind built about what happened, in about half a second. Think about the last time someone said something that upset you. Was it the words themselves that caused the pain? Or was it what the mind did with those words, the meaning it assigned, the history it attached, the fear it activated? Buddhism is not saying your feelings are wrong. It is saying that most human suffering is not caused directly by events. It is caused by the commentary the untrained mind runs over those events, non-stop, 24 hours a day. This is why the present moment is so important in Buddhist teaching, not because the present is always pleasant. Sometimes it is deeply uncomfortable. Sometimes it contains grief or pain or boredom or fear. The present moment is not a guarantee of happiness, but it is the only place where life is actually occurring. The past is memory. The future is imagination. The present, this breath, this sound, this feeling right now is the only thing that is real, and most people are anywhere but here. There was a carpenter who came to a Zen teacher and said, "I cannot focus. My mind jumps everywhere. I start one task and my mind is already on the next one. I cannot be still." The teacher did not give him breathing exercises. He did not recommend a retreat. He said, "When you are sawing wood, just saw wood." The carpenter looked confused. The teacher said it again. "When you are sawing wood, just saw wood. Nothing else. Not planning, not worrying. Just the wood, just the saw. Just this." That teaching is so simple it almost sounds useless. But try it. Actually try it. The next time you wash dishes, just wash dishes. Feel the temperature of the water. Notice the weight of the plate. Hear the sound. Do not plan your evening while washing dishes. Do not replay a conversation. Just wash dishes. Most people last about 11 seconds before the mind wanders. And that wandering, that constant automatic pulling away from what is, that is the habit Buddhism is trying to gently, patiently undo. Because here is what that wandering costs you. Every moment the mind is somewhere other than here, you are missing your own life. Not in a dramatic sense, in a very ordinary, very quiet sense. The meal you ate while scrolling, you were not really there for it. The conversation you had while half distracted, you were not fully present for it. The walk you took while mentally composing emails, that walk did not really happen for you. Your body moved through it, but you were not there. And this accumulates over weeks, over years, over decades. People arrive at old age and feel, with genuine shock, that life went by so fast that they cannot remember large portions of it clearly. And the reason is not that time moved faster. The reason is that they were not present for most of it. They were in the past or the future for the majority of their waking hours. And life, meanwhile, happened without a witness. Buddhism teaches that the present moment is not just where peace lives, it is where everything real lives. Joy is only ever felt now. Love is only ever experienced now. Beauty is only ever seen now. The mind that is always somewhere else, always planning, always reviewing, always anticipating, that mind filters out an enormous amount of what makes life worth living. Not because those things are not happening, but because there is nobody home to receive them. Now this is where something quietly radical enters the conversation, because Buddhism does not just say, be present, it goes further. It says that when you are truly present, something happens to the experience of suffering itself. Not that suffering disappears, but that it changes shape. Pain that is met with full, open, undistracted awareness feels different from pain that the mind is simultaneously fighting, judging, catastrophizing about, and demanding should not exist. The resistance to pain, Buddhism argues, often hurts more than the pain itself. There is a phrase in Buddhist teaching, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And before that sounds dismissive, before it sounds like someone telling a person in genuine agony to just think differently, understand what it is actually pointing at. Physical pain, loss, disappointment, these are real. They will happen. They are part of life, and no amount of mindfulness erases that. But the suffering that comes from mentally fighting what is real, from insisting this should not be happening, from replaying what could have been different, from projecting the pain permanently into the future, that layer of suffering, Buddhism says, is something the mind adds. And what the mind adds, the mind can also learn to stop adding. This is extraordinarily difficult to do. Nobody is pretending otherwise. The habit of mental commentary is so old, so automatic, so deeply grooved into human neurology that interrupting it even briefly takes real discipline. This is why Buddhist practice is called practice, not performance, not achievement, practice. You do it imperfectly, repeatedly across thousands of ordinary moments, and slowly, so slowly you almost do not notice it, the mind begins to settle. Even modern neuroscience has started catching up to what Buddhist monks have known for 2.5 millennia. Studies on long-term meditators show measurable changes in the brain, particularly in the regions associated with attention, emotional regulation, and self-referential thinking. The mind is not fixed. It is not permanently wired to suffer. It can be trained the way a muscle can be trained, not to become emotionless, but to become less enslaved to its own noise. There is something almost counterintuitive that happens when a person genuinely begins to practice presence. The ordinary becomes extraordinary, not in a mystical sense, in a very simple, very human sense. The morning light through a window becomes something worth noticing. A conversation becomes something worth actually listening to. A meal becomes something worth actually tasting. Life does not have to become more dramatic or more successful or more impressive. It just has to be more inhabited, more lived from the inside. The monk making tea every morning for 40 years is not having a boring life. He is having a completely different relationship with life than most people ever experience. He is not going through the motions. He is inside every motion. And that quality of being fully inside your own experience is what Buddhism identifies as one of the closest things to genuine happiness that a human being can access without changing a single external circumstance. This is perhaps the most democratic teaching Buddhism has to offer. You do not need money for this. You do not need status or success or the right relationship or the right body or the right circumstances. You need only this moment, the one that is already here, already unfolding, already offering itself completely. The question has never been whether the present moment is available. The question is whether you are. And that is where the real practice begins, not on a cushion in a monastery, not in a weekend retreat. It begins in the Tuesday afternoon that feels unremarkable, in the traffic that feels frustrating, in the conversation that feels mundane, in the body that feels tired. Those are not obstacles to presence. Those are the practice itself. And the person who learns to be fully alive in those ordinary, imperfect, unremarkable moments, that person has discovered something that no achievement could ever buy them. But what happens when life asks you to go further, when it asks you to not just be present, but to actually let go? That is exactly where this journey leads next. Letting go, the most powerful thing a human can do. There is an old trap used in parts of South Asia to catch monkeys. It is remarkably simple. A hunter takes a heavy jar with a narrow opening and places something sweet inside, a piece of fruit, some rice, something the monkey will want. The monkey comes, it reaches inside, its hand wraps around the food, and then it tries to pull its hand out. But the fist, the closed, gripping fist, is too wide for the opening. The monkey is stuck. And here is the part that makes this story genuinely haunting. The monkey could free itself in 1 second. All it has to do is open its hand, let go of the food, and walk away. But it does not. It screams, it panics, it pulls harder, and it stays trapped. Not by the jar, not by the hunter, not by any force in the world, but entirely by its own grip. You already know what that story means. You have probably felt that grip. Maybe you are feeling it right now, around a relationship that ended but has not ended in your mind, around a version of yourself you thought you would be by now, around an old wound that should have healed, but you keep pressing on it, checking if it still hurts, confirming that it does. The trap is not out there. It never was. The trap is the holding on. And the most quietly devastating thing about it is that the hand can open at any moment. That option has always been available. It's just that nobody tells you how terrifying that option feels. Buddhism places letting go, what it calls upekkha in some contexts, or more broadly the practice of non-attachment, at the very center of the path toward freedom. Not as a nice idea, not as a poetic suggestion, as the actual mechanism of liberation. Because everything the previous parts of this journey have pointed toward, understanding craving, being present, seeing the mind clearly, all of it is preparation for this, for the moment when you actually have to open the hand, when understanding is no longer enough and something has to actually release. But letting go is possibly the most misunderstood concept in all of Buddhist teaching, and the misunderstanding comes from a very reasonable place. When most people hear the words let go, they hear give up, they hear stop caring, they hear become someone who floats through life unbothered, emotionally unavailable, detached from everything that matters. And that version of letting go sounds less like freedom and more like a personality disorder. So let us clear this up completely, because the confusion around this single idea has caused more people to dismiss Buddhism than almost anything else. Letting go does not mean you stop loving. It does not mean relationships stop mattering. It does not mean you become indifferent to outcomes or stop working towards things you care about. What it means, and this is the precise, important, life-changing distinction, is that you stop making your inner peace conditional on those things. You stop writing contracts with the universe that say, I will be okay only if this person stays, only if this plan works, only if life cooperates in this specific way. Because the universe, it turns out, does not sign those contracts. It never has, and waiting for it to do so is the definition of a suffering that has no exit. Think about grief for a moment. Real grief. The kind that comes when you lose someone or something that genuinely mattered. Buddhism does not ask you to skip grief. It does not ask you to smile through loss or pretend that impermanence is always beautiful and easy to accept. It acknowledges fully that loss is painful, that endings hurt, that some things, when they go, leave a shape in you that takes a long time to settle into. What Buddhism asks is something different. It asks, after the grief has moved through you, are you going to let it keep moving, or are you going to hold it in place? Are you going to grieve, or are you going to grip? There is a story of a woman who came to the Buddha after her young son died. She was inconsolable, completely shattered. She carried the child's body to the Buddha and begged him to bring the boy back to life. The Buddha did not turn her away. He did not lecture her about impermanence. He looked at her with complete compassion and said, I can help you. But first, go into the village and bring me a mustard seed from a home that has never known death. She went. She knocked on door after door, and at every single house the same story. A mother lost, a father gone, a child taken too soon, a brother, a grandparent, a friend. She could not find a single home that grief had not visited. And somewhere in that walking, something shifted inside her. She returned to the Buddha without the mustard seed, but she returned different. She had felt, in the most direct possible way, that her loss was not a punishment. It was not unique to her. It was the price of loving anything in a world where everything changes. And in understanding that, really understanding it, not just intellectually, but in her bones, something in her released. That story does not end with the woman becoming happy. It ends with her becoming free. And those two things are not the same. Happiness, in the ordinary sense, comes and goes. Freedom, the kind that comes from genuinely accepting impermanence, that is something steadier, something that does not require circumstances to be kind before it can exist. Now here is the part about letting go that nobody really talks about. The reason it is so difficult is not weakness, it is not a character flaw, it is biology. The human brain is wired at a very deep evolutionary level to hold on, to remember threats, to replay painful events so it can prepare for them next time, to attach to people and things that feel safe. That wiring kept human beings alive for hundreds of thousands of years. It is not a mistake, but it is also wildly inappropriate for the kind of suffering most modern people face, because most modern suffering is not a predator in the grass, it is a story in the mind, and the ancient survival brain cannot tell the difference. This is why letting go requires practice and not just intention. You can understand intellectually that holding on to resentment is hurting you more than the person you resent. You can know it completely and still feel the grip tighten when you think about what happened, because knowing and releasing are two entirely different processes. The mind understands things in language, but release happens somewhere below language, in the body, in the nervous system, in the quiet space beneath the words. Buddhist meditation, particularly a practice called vipassana or insight meditation, works precisely at that level. It is not about thinking better thoughts. It is about sitting with discomfort long enough that the body learns, gradually, that the feeling will not destroy it, that the grief, the anger, the fear, they are not permanent states. They are weather. They move through. And every time you sit with that weather instead of running from it, the nervous system updates its belief about how dangerous that feeling is. The grip loosens, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped fighting what was already there. There is a particular kind of pain that almost everyone carries and almost nobody talks about openly. It is the pain of an unlived life, the version of yourself you imagined you would be, the path you thought you were on before something redirected it, the relationship you believed was permanent, the dream you held so carefully and for so long that letting go of it feels like letting go of a piece of your identity. Like, without that dream, who are you even? And that question, who am I without the thing I am holding on to? That is the question that sits right at the center of the letting go practice. Because the honest answer, the one Buddhism gently insists on, is that you are not the things you hold. You never were. The self that needs to grip, that feels it will disappear without the right circumstances, that self is itself something the mind constructed, not the real you. A role you have been playing so long it started to feel permanent. And one of the most disorienting and eventually liberating realizations in Buddhist practice is that underneath all the gripping, underneath all the roles and the identities and the stories, there is something that does not require any of it, something that is already whole, already okay, something that the relentless accumulation of more has actually been obscuring. This is not an argument for poverty or for giving up ambition or for retreating from life. Let that be absolutely clear. Buddhism produced monks and merchants equally. It did not say that having things is wrong. It said that being owned by what you have or what you want is the source of suffering. A person can be enormously successful and completely free. The success does not cause the suffering. The attachment to the success, the terror of losing it, that is where the suffering lives. There is something almost humorous about the human relationship with control. People spend extraordinary amounts of energy trying to control things that have never in the history of the universe been controllable. What other people think of them, how relationships unfold, whether their plans succeed exactly as imagined, whether they age gracefully or awkwardly, whether life stays fair. And the effort, the enormous, exhausting, relentless effort of trying to manage all of that is itself a primary source of suffering, not the outcomes, the effort to control the outcomes. Letting go in Buddhist practice is not passive. This is important. It is one of the most active, courageous things a human being can do because it requires walking directly into the fear that if you open your hand, everything falls apart, that if you stop gripping the story, you lose yourself, that if you accept what is, you are somehow giving permission for things to be wrong. None of that is true. But the fear is real, and walking through it anyway, that takes a kind of bravery that very few traditions actually name or honor. Think of a river. The person who is suffering is trying to hold the river in place. They're standing in the current with their arms out, insisting the water stop moving. And the water, being water, keeps moving anyway, flowing around them, past them, indifferent to the insistence. Buddhism does not say stop being in the river. It says stop trying to hold it still. Let yourself float. Not because the river is safe, Rivers are not always safe, but because fighting the current is the one thing that guarantees you will drown. The moments in life when people have experienced something close to genuine letting go, they almost always describe it the same way: a lightness, a sudden, almost ridiculous sense of space where there was tightness before. Not happiness exactly, more like relief, like a breath they did not know they were holding finally released. And what follows that relief is not emptiness. What follows is clarity. Energy that was being used to grip becomes available for living, for creating, for connecting, for being present in ways the grip was making impossible. This is what Buddhism means when it talks about freedom. Not freedom from responsibility, not freedom from feeling, freedom from the unconscious, exhausting, relentless war the mind wages against the natural movement of life. When that war ends, even temporarily, even imperfectly, life does not become smaller, it becomes larger, quieter and larger at the same time. And the person standing in that space realizes, often with a shock of recognition, that this is what they were looking for all along. Not the thing they were gripping. This, the space that opens when the grip releases. And the question that naturally rises from all of this, if letting go is the doorway, what is on the other side? What do you actually do with a mind that is no longer at war with itself? What does a life look like that is built not on grasping but on something steadier? That answer has a name in Buddhism, and it begins in a place most people would never think to look. It begins in the mind itself, in the deliberate, careful, transformative training of the one thing you carry with you into every single moment of your existence. Training the mind where true happiness is born. In the late 1970s, a young American scientist walked into a Tibetan monastery in India. He was not there to find religion. He was there because he had a question that his entire field of neuroscience could not yet answer. The question was simple but enormous. Can a human being deliberately change the structure of their own brain? Not through surgery, not through medication, through mental training alone. The monks he met had been meditating for decades, some of them for 50 years or more. He brought equipment, he measured, he observed, and what he found, what the data showed, shook the foundations of what Western science believed about the brain at the time. The brain was not fixed. It was not a finished product. It was more like a living landscape, and the mind, through deliberate, sustained practice, could actually reshape it. That scientist was Richard Davidson, and what he stumbled into, those monks already knew. Not as a theory, not as a hope, as a lived, daily, embodied reality. Buddhism has always understood something that modern science is only recently confirming, that the mind is not a passenger. It is not something that simply reacts to the world and produces feelings you have no say in. The mind is workable, it is trainable, and training it, not controlling it, not suppressing it, but genuinely training it, is the most consequential thing a human being can do with their time on Earth. Most people treat the mind the way they treat the weather. They check it each morning to see what mood arrived. They adjust their plans based on whatever mental atmosphere showed up that day. A good mental weather day, things go smoothly. A storm arrives, the whole day suffers. And there is this underlying assumption, almost never examined, that this is simply how it works, that you receive the mind you were given and you manage it as best you can. Buddhism disagrees, fundamentally and specifically disagrees. It says the mind you have today is not the mind you are stuck with. It is the mind you have trained so far, mostly by accident. Think about that for a moment. From the time you were born, your mind was being shaped by what you were told, by what you repeatedly experienced, by what you were rewarded for feeling and punished for expressing, by the culture around you, the family you grew up in, the losses you absorbed, the fears that took root. None of that shaping was deliberate. None of it was you sitting down and deciding, I would like to build a mind that catastrophizes under pressure, or one that reaches for distraction the moment discomfort appears, or one that replays failures more vividly than successes. That happened on its own, through repetition, through habit, through the grooves that experience carved into neural pathways over years and decades. And here's the thing about grooves. Once they are deep enough, the mind rolls into them automatically, without thinking, without choosing. The trigger appears, a criticism, a rejection, a moment of boredom, and the mind follows the groove, straight into anxiety or anger or numbness or whatever particular response got practiced most over the years. This is not weakness. This is just how learning works. The brain automates what it repeats. It is extraordinarily efficient that way. The problem is that efficiency works in all directions. It automates suffering just as readily as it automates skill. Buddhist mental training, what the tradition calls bhavana, which translates roughly as cultivation or development, is the deliberate process of creating new grooves, not by fighting the old ones, not by suppressing or shaming the habitual responses, but by practicing something different often enough and consistently enough that the new pathway becomes more available than the old one. This is not positive thinking. It is not telling yourself everything is fine when it is not. It is something far more rigorous and far more honest than that. The tradition identifies several specific qualities of mind worth training, not as abstract virtues, but as actual capacities that can be developed with practice, the way a musician develops technique. Attention is one, the ability to place awareness where you choose and keep it there, not because you forced it into submission, but because the muscle is strong enough to hold. Most people's attention is not theirs. It belongs to whoever captures it last. The phone, the notification, the loudest voice in the room, the most urgent emotion in the body. Training attention is training sovereignty, the quiet, radical act of deciding what your mind engages with. Then there is equanimity, a word that sounds distant and clinical until you see what it actually means in practice. Equanimity is not emotional flatness. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the capacity to be moved without being swept away, to feel anger without becoming anger, to feel sadness without drowning in it, to feel joy without clinging to it so desperately that its natural fading becomes a source of grief. Equanimity is the difference between standing in the ocean and being pulled under by it. You are still in the water. You still feel everything the water does, but there is something stable underneath your feet. There is a specific meditation practice in Buddhism called samatha, or calm abiding. It sounds almost too simple to take seriously. You sit, you place your attention on the breath, you notice when the mind wanders, and you bring it back. That is it. That is the whole practice at its most basic. And people try it for 3 minutes, get frustrated that the mind keeps wandering, and conclude that they are bad at meditation. But that frustration reveals a misunderstanding of what the practice is actually for. The point is not to prevent the mind from wandering. The point is the returning. Every single time the mind wanders and you notice and you bring it back, that is a repetition. That is the mental equivalent of a bicep curl. The wandering is not failure. The wandering is the weight you are training against. Over time, and it genuinely does take time, this practice changes something in the quality of everyday experience. Not dramatically, not all at once, but a kind of spaciousness begins to develop between stimulus and response. Where before there was an immediate, automatic reaction, something begins to open, a small gap, a fraction of a second that was not there before. And in that gap lives the most important thing a human being can possess, the ability to choose. Not to choose what happens, but to choose how to meet what happens. That gap, that tiny, hard-won, practice-built gap, is where freedom actually lives. Buddhism also teaches a practice called vipassana, insight meditation, which goes deeper than calm. It is not about finding peace in stillness. It is about seeing clearly while in stillness. Seeing the actual nature of thoughts, that they arise, exist briefly, and pass. That they are not commands, not facts, not the truth about who you are. They are events in the mind, weather passing through.
And when you can sit and watch a thought arise and dissolve without grabbing it, without running from it, without building a story around it, something fundamentally shifts in your relationship with your own interior world. You stop being the thoughts. You become the one who notices the thoughts. And that shift changes everything. Here is something that surprises almost every person who begins to practice seriously. The mind, left to itself, is not naturally peaceful, but it is also not naturally chaotic. Underneath the noise, underneath the chatter and the planning and the worrying and the commentary, there is a quality of awareness that is already present, already clear, already quiet. It is not something you create through meditation, it is something you uncover. The practice does not manufacture a new mind. It removes the layers of static that have been obscuring the one that was always there. This is one of the most quietly revolutionary ideas in all of Buddhist teaching. The happiness you are searching for is not somewhere ahead of you. It is not contingent on fixing everything that is wrong with your life, or becoming a better version of yourself, or resolving every unresolved question. It is already present, in the same way that the sun is already present, even on a cloudy day. The clouds are real, the obscuration is real, but the sun never went anywhere. And the practice of training the mind is, in this sense, more like clearing clouds than building a sun. Now, somebody will ask, and it is a fair question, does this mean that external circumstances do not matter at all? That suffering caused by poverty or injustice or illness is just a matter of perspective? And the answer is no. Buddhism does not say that. It is not a teaching that asks oppressed people to simply adjust their minds and tolerate injustice. What it says is more nuanced. It says that two people can face the same external difficulty and have completely different internal experiences of it. And that difference is not random. It is the result of how the mind has been trained. That does not make suffering the victim's fault. It makes mental training an act of genuine resistance against unnecessary suffering, one the world cannot give you and cannot take away.
There is a story about a monk who was imprisoned by an oppressive government for many years. When he was finally released, older, thinner, marked by what he had endured, someone asked him whether he had ever been afraid during those years. He thought about it carefully, and he said, "Yes, I was afraid once. I was afraid I might lose my compassion for my captors." He had been in a cell. His body had been confined, but his mind, the mind he had trained for decades, that had never been a prisoner, not once. That story is not comfortable. It is almost too large to hold, but it points at something real about what mental training actually makes possible in a human life. There is also a practice in Buddhism called metta, or loving-kindness meditation, which addresses something specific that most people do not expect to find in a conversation about the mind: self-compassion. The capacity to treat your own inner experience with the same gentleness you would offer someone you love who is suffering. This sounds simple. It is not simple. For most people, particularly those who have spent decades being their own harshest critic, the instruction to be kind to yourself produces a feeling that sits somewhere between discomfort and outright rebellion. The inner critic is loud. It is convincing. It has a very long file of evidence, and it presents itself as the voice of honesty when it is actually the voice of an old wound that never healed. Metta practice begins with a simple, repetitive offering of phrases toward yourself. Something like, "May I be well. May I be safe. May I be free from suffering. May I be happy." And the first many times you do this, the mind resists it. It feels awkward, performative, undeserved. Good. That resistance is exactly the pattern that needs to be seen. Because a mind that finds it easier to extend compassion to strangers than to itself is a mind carrying something heavy. And the weight of that something, the constant low-level self-judgment that most people walk around with, is itself a significant source of exhaustion and suffering that never gets named. Training the mind is also training the relationship with failure. This is enormous and underappreciated. The untrained mind treats failure as evidence of inadequacy, of unworthiness, of being fundamentally not enough. And because failure is an inevitable part of any genuine attempt at anything, a mind that responds to failure with self-punishment is a mind that learns, over time, to stop attempting things genuinely, to play smaller, to reach for less so the fall is shorter. Buddhism does not celebrate failure, but it frames it entirely differently, as information, as a necessary part of the learning that produces wisdom, not a verdict on the person, a data point on the path. Every single human being has two lives, a Buddhist teacher once said: the life they are living and the life they are capable of living. And most people go to their graves with the distance between those two lives barely reduced, not because they lacked intelligence, not because circumstances were entirely against them, but because nobody ever told them that the instrument being used to navigate that distance, the mind itself, could be worked on, deliberately, patiently, with the same seriousness a musician brings to an instrument they intend to master. You do not need a monastery for this. That is perhaps the most important practical note in all of Buddhist mental training. The monastery is useful, retreat is valuable, but the actual practice happens in ordinary life. In the moment you notice anger rising and pause before speaking. In the moment you catch the mind spinning a catastrophe and gently return it to what is actually happening. In the moment you sit with discomfort for 10 more seconds than felt tolerable yesterday. These are not small things. They are the very substance of the path. And every one of those moments, every single one, is building something. Not a perfect mind, not an enlightened one necessarily, but a freer one, a steadier one. A mind that over time becomes more of a home and less of a battlefield. And when the mind begins to settle, when the noise clears enough to reveal the quiet underneath, something unexpected happens. The world does not look smaller or colder or more distant. It looks closer, more vivid, more real. Other people stop being obstacles or mirrors and start being what they have always been. Other beings doing the same difficult, impermanent, beautiful, bewildering thing you are doing. And from that recognition, something arises naturally that no amount of effort could force. Something that turns out to be one of the most powerful sources of genuine happiness that a human life can contain. Something Buddhism calls compassion. And that opening toward others, is exactly where this story goes next. Compassion, connection, and the joy of giving. In 1972, a psychologist named David Lycan began one of the longest-running studies on human happiness ever conducted. He followed thousands of people across decades, tracked their incomes, their relationships, their achievements, their losses. And what he found disrupted nearly every assumption the field had been working with. Money mattered, but only up to a point. Success mattered, but its effect on happiness was surprisingly short. The single variable that showed up consistently across cultures, across income levels, across vastly different life circumstances as a reliable predictor of genuine well-being was the quality of a person's connections with other human beings. Not the number of connections, the quality, the depth, the realness of them. People with deep, genuine bonds reported feeling that their lives had meaning in a way that people with every other advantage but shallow relationships almost never did. Buddhism arrived at this conclusion 2,500 years before the data did, but it went further than the data goes. It did not just observe that connection makes people happier, it asked why. And the answer it gave was not sentimental, it was structural. It said that the illusion of separateness, the deeply felt sense that you are a self enclosed inside a body, fundamentally apart from everyone and everything around you, is the root of a specific and pervasive kind of suffering. And that compassion, real compassion, not the polite performance of it, is both the dissolving of that illusion and one of the most direct pathways to genuine freedom that a human being can walk. That is a large claim. So let us walk into it carefully. because the word compassion gets used so casually, so constantly, and in so many greeting card contexts that its actual weight has been almost completely lost. In Buddhist teaching, compassion, karuna in Pali, is not a feeling you perform. It is not sympathy from a safe distance. It is not the mild discomfort you feel watching a sad news story before changing the channel. Karuna is the genuine, unflinching capacity to be present with suffering, your own and others, without turning away. To actually let it land, to let the reality of another person's pain be real to you, rather than something to be managed or minimized or immediately solved. Most people have been taught, in very subtle ways, to keep a certain distance from other people's suffering, not out of cruelty, out of self-protection, because suffering is uncomfortable, and proximity to it activates something in the nervous system that wants to either fix it immediately or move away from it quickly. We call this empathy fatigue. We call it emotional boundaries. And sometimes those things are genuinely necessary. But Buddhism points at something important here. The distance we keep from other people's pain is almost exactly equal to the distance we keep from our own. The same wall that keeps their suffering out keeps your own aliveness at arm's length too. There's a distinction in Buddhist teaching between empathy and compassion that is subtle and important. Empathy is feeling what another person feels, absorbing their emotional state, being moved by it, resonating with it. That is real and valuable, but without training, pure empathy can become overwhelming. It can lead to burnout, to withdrawal, to becoming so saturated in other people's pain that you become useless to them. Compassion, karuna, is different. It includes the wish that the suffering would end without necessarily requiring you to absorb the suffering as your own. It is warm without being enmeshed, present without being consumed. It is the quality of a skilled doctor who cares deeply for a patient but does not need to develop the illness themselves in order to help. Now here's the thing about genuine compassion that changes it from a virtue into a practice. It has to begin somewhere honest. And in Buddhist teaching, it begins with yourself, not as an act of selfishness, as a matter of basic logic. You cannot offer water from an empty vessel. A person who has never genuinely extended compassion inward, who has spent decades treating their own failures and fears and wounds with contempt, that person does not have less compassion. They have it, but it is turned against themselves. And teaching it to flow outward requires first teaching it to stop being weaponized inward. This is why self-compassion is not a detour from the Buddhist path. It is the very beginning of it.
Think about the people in your life who have made you feel truly seen, not flattered, not managed, actually seen. There are probably not many, and the ones there are, you remember them. Something about being in their presence made you feel less alone in your own experience, more willing to be honest, more able to breathe. What those people have, that quality of genuine, unhurried presence with you, is not a personality trait they were born with. It is a practice. The practice of being genuinely interested in another human being, rather than just waiting for their relevance to your own story to become clear. Buddhism teaches something called mudita, which translates as sympathetic joy or appreciative joy. It is the capacity to feel genuine happiness at another person's happiness. And if you read that and felt even a flicker of resistance, if something in you wanted to immediately qualify that with yes, but, then you have just located one of the quieter sources of suffering in your own life. Because the inability to feel joy at another's joy is the signature of the separated self, the self that is keeping score, the self that has decided that happiness is a limited resource and someone else's portion is somehow related to yours. That belief, that quiet, mostly unconscious belief, poisons more human relationships than almost any dramatic betrayal ever could. Here is something genuinely surprising that Buddhist practice reveals about connection. The feeling of separateness, of being a lone self navigating a world full of other lone selves, is not actually the baseline human experience. It feels like it is. It feels natural and obvious and simply the way things are. But Buddhist practitioners who have gone deep into contemplative practice consistently report something else.
They describe moments, sometimes brief, sometimes extended, in which the boundary between self and other becomes less solid, less convincing. Not mystically, not in a way that requires any particular belief system, just in a quiet factual recognition that what you are is not as separate as it appeared, that the breath you just exhaled will be inhaled by someone else, that the food that became your body was grown by hands you will never meet, that the language in your head was given to you by people long dead. You are not a closed system. You never were. And when that recognition moves from intellectual to felt, when it drops from the head into the body, something extraordinary happens to the experience of other people. They stop being background characters in your story. They stop being obstacles or tools or mirrors. They become, in a very simple and direct way, real as you are, as confused, as frightened, as capable of joy, as marked by loss, as desperate for genuine connection. And from that recognition, that simple, clear, direct recognition of shared humanness, generosity arises, not as a moral obligation, not as something you do because you should, but as something that flows naturally, the way water flows downhill. Dana is the Buddhist word for generosity, and it sits at the very beginning of Buddhist ethical training, not as an afterthought, but as a foundation. Because generosity is the most direct physical expression of non-attachment. When you give, genuinely give, without calculating the return, you are practicing in a tangible, embodied way the very thing that meditation practices internally. You are opening the hand, releasing the grip, trusting that enough will remain. And every genuine act of giving creates something in the giver that no amount of receiving ever quite produces. A lightness, a sense of expansion, a feeling of being connected to something larger than the narrow story of the self. Modern psychology has a name for what happens in the brain during genuine acts of giving. It is sometimes called the helper's high. The neuroscience shows measurable activation in the brain's reward centers, the same areas that respond to food, to pleasure, to things the organism needs to survive, when a person engages in authentic generosity. This is not coincidental. Buddhism has always argued that giving is not against self-interest. It is the highest expression of correctly understood self-interest. Because the self that benefits from giving is not the small, defended, anxious self that is always calculating and protecting. It is the larger self, the one that knows it is not separate, the one that feels another's relief as its own relief.
There is a story about a man who goes to a Buddhist teacher, complaining that his life feels empty. He has everything he was told he needed, the career, the house, the status, and yet there is a hollowness he cannot shake. The teacher listens, then says, "Every morning for 1 month, do one thing for someone else before you do anything for yourself. Something small is fine. Just make sure it is genuinely for them and not for the feeling it gives you." The man is skeptical, but desperate enough to try. A month later, he returns. He says, "I do not know what happened. Everything looks the same. My job, my house, my problems are all still there, but I feel different, like something opened up." The teacher smiled and said, "That opening, that is what you were looking for. That is the thing you thought the career and the house were supposed to give you. You found it in the giving, not the getting, because that is where it has always lived." Connection in Buddhism is not limited to the people you already know or already like. This is where the teaching becomes genuinely demanding. The practice of metta, loving kindness, traditionally moves in widening circles. It begins with yourself, then moves to those you love easily, then to neutral people, strangers, acquaintances, people who are simply there without strong feeling attached, then to difficult people, people who have hurt you, people whose behavior you genuinely find troubling, and finally, to all beings everywhere without exception. Not because those difficult people deserve warmth in some cosmic reward sense, but because the capacity to hold even difficult people with some degree of goodwill is a measure of how free the heart has become, how much of the world it can contain without contracting.
This is where most people hit a wall. The instruction to extend compassion toward people who have genuinely hurt you, that does not go down easily. It should not go down easily. It is hard. It is supposed to be hard. Buddhism does not ask you to pretend that harmful behavior is not harmful. It does not ask you to invite people who damage you back into your life in the name of compassion. What it asks is something more internal. It asks whether you can hold the fact of someone's difficult behavior without allowing it to close your heart permanently. Whether you can understand, not excuse, understand that the person who hurt you was also, in their own way, a person in pain, acting from their own unexamined wounds. Not because that makes it okay, because understanding that sets you free from carrying their burden on top of your own. There is a quality of loneliness in modern life that has no precise name. It exists even in cities full of people, even in families, even in relationships. It is the loneliness of being seen only partially, of performing the version of yourself that others can accept while keeping the rest carefully hidden, of having conversations that skim surfaces, of sharing images of life rather than the actual texture of it. Buddhism suggests this loneliness is not a social problem that better technology or more social events can solve. It is the loneliness of the separated self encountering the limits of its own walls, and the only thing that genuinely addresses it is the willingness to be real, to lower the performance, to let another person see not just your highlights, but your weight. Genuine connection, the kind that actually nourishes, requires a quality Buddhism calls right speech, not just honesty in the narrow sense of not lying, but speaking in a way that is truthful, timely, kind, useful, and spoken with goodwill rather than as a weapon. Words carry enormous weight in Buddhist teaching, not because speech is more important than action, but because speech is the form most human relating takes, and the patterns of speech most people have developed, the half-truths, the performative agreements, the things left unsaid that slowly become walls, those patterns are themselves practices. They train the mind in separation, the same way meditation trains it in presence. Joy, in Buddhist understanding, is not something that arrives when circumstances align correctly. It is something that is released when the wall between self and world becomes more porous, when you genuinely celebrate another person's good fortune, when you sit with someone's suffering without flinching, when you give without calculating the return, when you speak from something true rather than something safe. In all of those moments, something moves, something that was contracted opens, and that opening, repeated and deepened over time, is not happiness in the ordinary sense of the word. It is something older and quieter and more reliable than happiness. It is what the tradition sometimes calls the heart's natural capacity, not built, revealed, the way a stone is revealed when the river washes the mud away.
And this is perhaps the most counterintuitive conclusion Buddhism offers about the search for personal happiness. The more tightly that search is focused on the self, on my comfort, my peace, my growth, my healing, the smaller the territory available for happiness to inhabit. But the moment the circle expands, the moment the genuine well-being of even one other person becomes as real and as important as your own, the territory available for joy expands with it, not linearly, enormously. As if happiness, it turns out, is not a personal possession, but a shared field. And the more beings you invite into that field with genuine care, the larger and more vivid and more sustaining that field becomes. Which raises the question, if connection and compassion are the field where joy grows, what is the soil? What is the underlying condition that makes all of this possible? That question has one answer in Buddhism, and it is simpler than almost anything else in this journey, but it asks more of us than almost anything else we have encountered. It is the subject of where this story goes next. Your new life begins today, the final Buddhist truths. There is a moment that happens to almost every person who has ever walked seriously with Buddhist teaching. It does not happen in a monastery.
It does not happen during a retreat or after years of disciplined practice. It happens on an ordinary day, maybe a Tuesday, maybe while making coffee or sitting in traffic or looking out a window at nothing in particular. And in that moment, without warning, without drama, something shifts. Not everything, not permanently, just for a moment, the noise settles. The grasping pauses, the endless forward lean of the mind stops. And what is left, what was always there underneath the noise, is something so simple and so complete that the mind almost cannot believe it did not see it before. It is not enlightenment, it is not a vision, it is just this moment, this breath, this ordinary, unremarkable, utterly sufficient now. And in that moment, for just that moment, it is enough. You are enough. Not because anything changed, because you finally stopped insisting that it needed to. That moment is not the end of the journey. It is the confirmation that the journey is real, that what Buddhism has been pointing at across 2,500 years of teaching is not a fairy tale or a philosophy from monks who have escaped real life. It is a description of something actually available, something that does not require a perfect life, a fixed past, a resolved future, or a different version of yourself than the one sitting here right now. It is available in this life, in this body, on this particular Tuesday, with all its imperfections and incompleteness and stubborn refusal to be anything other than what it is. But let us be honest about something before we arrive at conclusions. Because Buddhism, at its best, is ruthlessly honest, and it would not forgive a script that softened the difficulty to make it more palatable. The path toward genuine happiness, the kind this entire journey has been pointing toward, is not easy. It is not a weekend workshop. It is not a set of techniques you apply to your existing life and watch it transform in 30 days. It is a complete reorientation of the relationship between the mind and experience. And that reorientation, that slow, imperfect, ongoing, deeply personal reorientation, requires something that is genuinely rare in the modern world. It requires patience with yourself that has no deadline attached to it. Because here is what actually happens to most people who begin this path with genuine sincerity. They start well, they feel something real in the early practices, a taste of stillness, a moment of genuine release, and then life happens. The old patterns return, the mind goes back to its grooves, the gripping returns, the anxiety returns. The Monday morning arrives, and the quiet of the weekend retreat feels impossibly distant. And the temptation at that point, the very understandable, very human temptation, is to conclude that the path did not work, that they are somehow constitutionally unsuited to this, that everyone else manages it, but something in them is broken beyond the reach of any practice. Buddhism has a word for that moment. It is not failure. It is not a sign to stop. That moment, that return of the old patterns after a taste of something better, is called practice. It is the practice. The falling back is not the opposite of the path. It is the texture of the path. Every single teacher in the Buddhist tradition has fallen back, has lost the thread, has woken up on a Thursday gripped by the same anxiety they thought they had seen through 6 months earlier. The difference between a practitioner and someone who simply knows about the practice is not that the practitioner never falls back, it is that the practitioner knows how to return, knows that returning is always possible, knows that the path does not expire.
This is the final and perhaps most important truth Buddhism offers, and it arrives not as a grand revelation, but as something almost embarrassingly simple. You can begin again, at any moment, from any place, with any amount of mess behind you. The present moment, the one that is always here, always available, always beginning, does not require your past to have been different before it will receive you. It receives you exactly as you are, exactly as confused and tired and unfinished and still figuring it out as you actually are. This moment is not waiting for a better version of you. It is here for the actual one. Think about everything this journey has covered. The understanding that suffering is not a mistake, but a signal. That craving and attachment, not circumstances, are the root of the deepest human unhappiness. That the present moment is not a destination to be reached, but the only place life is actually occurring. that letting go is not losing, but releasing what was never truly yours to keep. That the mind is not fixed, but workable, trainable in the same way any meaningful skill is trained, with patience and repetition and the willingness to begin again. That compassion and connection are not detours from personal happiness, but the very field in which genuine happiness grows. That simplicity is not poverty of experience, but richness of attention. These are not ideas, they are discoveries, made by a human being sitting under a tree 25 centuries ago, verified by every person since who has had the courage to actually look. Now, here's something Buddhism says that most people find surprising. The goal of the path is not to become someone different. This is important because almost everyone who comes to spiritual practice comes carrying somewhere underneath their genuine curiosity a secret hope that they will finally become the person they were supposed to be, that the anxiety will be completely gone, the self-doubt permanently resolved, the difficult patterns finally and forever finished, and that hope, that beautiful, understandable, completely human hope, is itself a form of the same grasping that caused the suffering in the first place, because it is still oriented toward a future self, still saying, I will be okay when I become that. Buddhism gently and firmly redirects this. It says the goal is not to become someone different, it is to see clearly who you already are, underneath all the noise and the conditioning and the protective structures the mind built over years of managing a difficult world. What you are underneath all of that is already whole, already free. The practice is not construction, it is excavation. And what gets excavated, what emerges when the layers are cleared, is something Buddhist teaching calls Buddha nature. Not as a supernatural quality, not as something only monks can access, as the fundamental capacity of every human mind for clarity, compassion, and wakefulness. Every human being has this, not as a potential to be earned, as an already present reality being obscured by the clouds of conditioning and habit. You are not trying to become awake, you are trying to stop doing the things that prevent you from recognizing the awakeness that is already here. There is one final story this journey wants to leave you with. There was a student who came to a Zen master and said, I have been practicing for 10 years. I sit every morning. I study the teachings. I try to live rightly, but I still suffer. I still get angry. I still feel lost sometimes. Have I been doing it wrong? The master looked at him for a long moment and said, You have been practicing for 10 years and you still notice when you are suffering. You still care enough to ask. You still show up. He paused, then said, What makes you think that is not exactly right? The student sat with that, and slowly something in his face changed, not because he received an answer, because he recognized that the question itself had been carrying an assumption, that somewhere, at some point, the work was supposed to be done. The master was pointing at something else entirely, that this showing up, this noticing, this caring enough to keep asking, this is not the approach to the path. This is the path. So where does this leave you, practically? Because Buddhism is not a viewing experience. It is not something that happens to you through a screen. It is not absorbed by understanding it intellectually, however clearly. It has to be practiced in your actual life, in your actual body, your actual Tuesday. So here are not 10 steps or a system or a program. Here are simply the invitations that this entire journey has been building toward, offered not as obligations, but genuine openings.
The first invitation is to sit, not forever, not in perfect conditions. Just for a few minutes each day, place your attention on your breath and practice returning when the mind wanders. Not because stillness is the goal, because the act of returning, repeated over time, builds the most valuable capacity a human being can possess, the ability to choose where the mind goes rather than simply following wherever it leads. The second invitation is to notice. Through the ordinary day, begin to catch the moments of grasping, the reaching for the phone when a moment of discomfort arrives, the rehearsing of a future conversation, the replaying of a past one. Not to judge these moments, just to see them. Because what is seen clearly cannot control you in the same way that what operates in the dark can. Awareness is not passive. It is the beginning of every genuine change. The third invitation is to give something today. Not dramatically, not in a way that requires announcement or planning, something small and genuine. Attention, time, a kind word, actual presence in a conversation with someone who needed it. And notice what happens in you when you do. Not the feeling of having done something good that is still about you. The feeling of having genuinely connected, of having let another person's reality land. That feeling is data. It is showing you something about where happiness actually lives. The fourth invitation is to question one story you have been telling yourself that may no longer be true. Not with aggression, with honest curiosity. The story about why you cannot change. The story about what you deserve or do not deserve. The story about who hurt you and what that permanently means about the world. These stories are not lies exactly. They were conclusions drawn from real experiences. But conclusions drawn from the past do not have to be permanent maps for the future. Question one, gently. See what is underneath it. The fifth invitation, and perhaps the most radical of all, is to make peace with impermanence. Not in the abstract, in something specific. Something in your life right now that you have been fighting the natural movement of. A relationship changing shape. A version of yourself that is becoming something new. A chapter that is clearly ending even as you try to hold it open. Let it move. Not because letting go does not hurt, but because the fighting hurts more. And because on the other side of genuine release, as this entire journey has tried to show, there is something waiting that the gripping was making impossible to reach. Now, this video has covered a journey that took Siddhartha Gautama years of searching to walk. It cannot be absorbed in a single sitting. It was never meant to be. Think of it as a first encounter with a direction rather than a complete map. The map you will build yourself, through practice, through falling and returning, through the ordinary moments of your ordinary life approached with a little more curiosity and a little less urgency than before. That map is yours. No teacher can walk it for you. No video can substitute for the actual living of it. But something in you already knows the direction, has always known it. That quiet knowing, that small, persistent voice underneath all the noise, that is not something this video gave you. It was already there. This just helped you hear it a little more clearly. If this journey moved something in you, if even one moment across these parts made you pause and see something differently, then something real happened here. And that something real deserves to be shared. Not for metrics, not for an algorithm, because somewhere right now there is a person sitting alone at 3 in the morning, feeling the specific kind of empty that comes from chasing the wrong things for too long. And this video, if it reaches them, might be the thing that turns them toward a direction that actually leads somewhere. So share this, not because you were asked to, because you know someone who needs it. Drop a comment below and tell this community what was the one thing from this journey that landed most deeply for you, because your words might be exactly what someone else needed to hear today. Like this video if it earned that from you. Subscribe to Wisdom Woven if you want to keep walking in this direction, because this journey does not end here. It ends where it has always ended, in the next moment, the one that is already arriving, the one that is already, quietly, completely enough.
And the final truth Buddhism leaves us with, the one that sits underneath every teaching, every story, every practice this tradition has ever offered, is this: you were never broken. You were never fundamentally lacking. You were never required to earn your way to worthiness or work your way to peace. The happiness you have been searching for was never in the next achievement, the next relationship, the next version of your life. It was here, in the searching itself, in the willingness to ask, in the courage to look honestly, in the decision, made again and again and again, to return to this moment, this breath, this life, exactly as it is. That is not a consolation prize. That is the whole thing. That has always been the whole thing. And now, finally, quietly, completely, you know where to look.